In a few of my last videos, I had a couple of pretty trash takes on the meta. Not all of them were mistakes, but there were some pretty bad ones in there. So today, let's talk through them. Hi, I'm Lace, and as always, waifu over meta, but let's begin. I am going to start off the video by correcting what I think was my biggest mistake, which was Bladey down here at 7.5. Before I did that, what I did want to mention was that this is not a tier list. When I made the video, I called it a pull priority list. It's essentially saying, given a limited amount of gemmies, who should you pull for? And so if I was to instead replace these numbers with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way down, and so the list would look something like this, I would pull for Silver Wolf before I pull for Seele, and then Seele before I pulled for Luocha. This is kind of the idea that I was trying to go for the pull priority list. That does not make my mistake any better. It does mean that Blade is at least 6 down here. And so I definitely did my man dirty over here. I think he should be at least with Luocha. Now, Luocha and Blade, if you could only pull one, who would you pull for? Between the two, and knowing that Blade is a giga cracked DPS that is pretty much Seele level but AoE, I would actually still pull for Luocha over him. However, it gets a little bit more complex when we take circumstances into account. For example, if I was starting today and I didn't have any 5-star DPSs, I would say that Blade is actually a fantastic pick, both Blade and Seele. The game is just so much more fun and a lot easier when you have a top tier DPS, which these two definitely are. And even though Luocha is really good, if I could only have one 5-star, it's again probably these two. Luocha definitely provides incredible value in terms of like team stability, and you can use him with virtually any team, including all of the 4-star units. But from a team perspective, I would say that Luocha raises the team's performance floor versus these DPSs raising the team's performance ceiling. So yeah, at this point, if you don't have a 5-star DPS, this is probably what I would go for. But if you do have a 5-star DPS, it's probably going to look something like this. And we'll talk about the other characters later. Now, speaking of Luocha, let's talk about me calling him an 8.5 out of 10. I'm going to make something very clear. This guy right here in the 3rd slot is extremely good. Definitely the best healer in the game right now, and honestly for probably a long time, and also certainly one of the best units in the game right now. Ultra skill point efficient, AoE team healing, debuff stripping, cleanse, whatever, he can pretty much do it all. Therefore, from an effectiveness and performance point of view, he is definitely a 10 out of 10, an S+, whatever you want to call it. So then, in this video, why exactly did I rate him an 8.5 out of 10? Again, it's because this thing over here was a pull score. To me, it didn't matter if it was 8.5 or 9 or whatever, as long as he was kind of 3rd in place. And just because a character is really freaking good, it doesn't mean that you should actually be the highest on the priority list. For me, and probably try this experiment with yourself, but I was like, okay, well, if I could only have one 5-star, who would I have? It would be Silver Wolf. And if I could have 2, it'd be Silver Wolf and Seele. 3, it'd be these 3 up here. However, what I do understand now is that, and who could have known, but different people have different problems. For me personally, when I go and rate units, I ask myself, I prioritize which characters are going to get me significantly further in Memory of Chaos with the least amount of investment. And so it's for that reason that I prioritize Silver Wolf, and again, we'll talk about her a little bit later. However, what I do see now is that a lot of you actually prioritize what I would again call the floor, the team performance floor, which is completely valid because some of you probably had trouble surviving, or maybe you had to spend too many skill points to stay afloat, or just really enjoy the stability that this guy actually offers. And those things helped you push MOC because dead DPS is no DPS. I didn't see that before, but I definitely do see it now. But on top of that, I've been watching a lot of MOC clears, and there's a March 7th meta that's kind of developed. Because people are using March for her shields and freezes to get away with a no healer comp, and it works pretty freaking well. I actually also run it. And so that's why at that time, I was thinking to myself, I could actually get away with not rolling for Luocha because I could run Natasha on one side and March 7th on the other. It will be a little bit tougher, but it's certainly possible. However, you could kind of argue the same thing for DPSs. And so in the end, in my mind, Luocha is a premium healer who is incredibly good, but not exactly necessary. And so I hope you can understand why I thought that way. Obviously, that's kind of changed for me. I understand now that different people are in different circumstances and have different problems. Next, let's quickly talk about Silver Wolf. She made my garbage team 2 strong, especially thanks to the implant. The elemental weakness gives us an extra 20% damage, and so not only could I take my second juiced out DPS anywhere, because resources are limited, at the time I could only only build 2 DPSs, Seele and Sutang for me, but also because of the weakness, it allows us to more easily skip mechanics through breaking. However, the reality is that as we are able to build more and more characters to match the weaknesses in MOC, Silver Wolf's value, especially to veteran players, is going to actually drop. I think that she'll still be very relevant, especially with all of her debuffs, defense down, her ability to force the mono quantum team everywhere, but probably less of a must pull. Maybe even down here. And to be honest, I think a lot of you are starting to feel that now, where you do actually have a whole bunch of different characters built up, and you're finding that you don't actually need to bring Silver Wolf everywhere you go. And so it does actually make sense as to why you value her less. Alright, so next, let's talk about Seele. In most games, DPSs usually have a way higher chance of getting power crept, so you wouldn't actually prioritize them in terms of pulling. Jingyuan is kind of a case in point. Even though he's different elements to Blade, he also kind of got power crept in the AoE department. Also, please have a look at this beautiful meme I made for them. I spent a lot of time on it. And who knows if this Imbibitor Lune is actually going to power creep Blade and maybe even Seele. However, the thing about Seele is that she is the definition of the greatest defense being an incredible cracked out offense. She just has so many opportunities to outplay the enemy team because of her resurgence mechanic and her ultimate. And her damage ceiling is just sky high, especially in this meta of bosses and trash mobs, even without the resurgence calculated. For most people, she is the undisputed queen of damage. However, your boy Blade is certainly giving her a run for her money. And so I think that the best way to actually end this section is to say, well, if I was to start the game today, and I was only able to take one 5-star with me, who would it be? For general content, without any consideration for MOC trying to push hard, it would actually probably be Seele. But for MOC specifically, from my perspective, it would be Silver Wolf. The implanting for me has just opened so many opportunities and it lowers investment significantly. And that is why my pull priority looks like this for now, because I don't really know about Imbibitor and this Fu Xuan. But speaking of Fu Xuan, I also had a pretty bad take on her. Let's talk about her now. I said that there was no way, zero chance that Fu Xuan would actually power creep our Gepard. The reason that I actually said this was because, generally speaking, in the game so far, the paths are all centered around a couple of core themes. Hunt path characters are generally centered around high single target damage, with things like lower aggro, high single target multipliers. If they do have buffs, it's all going to be like crit damage, crit rate, attack, speed, they're all offensive. And so for preservation, I thought that it was going to be centered around protection, so things like taunts and aggros, shielding, damage nullification, damage reduction, effect resist, maybe even invincibility. And so it never crossed my mind that they might get a kit that included aspects from other paths, such as healing from abundance characters, or even offensive buffs like team damage buffs, which are traditionally from Harmony units. I thought that since Gepard had the AoE massive Giga Shields, the only other options for Fu Xuan would be things like damage reduction or effect resist, all of the other ones I said before, which were unlikely to actually be able to make them a solo sustainer. And so I do own up to this mistake, because honestly, the game is only 3 months old. It's kind of dumb to make such a bold statement. But I do hope that you can see the thought process as to what led me to that conclusion. And so from here, I'd like to thank those of you who actually left a comment on the last video, whether you were a dick about it or not. But I really do appreciate the ones who were a little bit more kind about it, because it doesn't cost anything to be nice. People have different opinions all the time, and it's important to kind of lay it all out, because individually, we might miss something, as you saw me do. That said though, this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.